something they did nothing to cause.
I'm sure you have looked across the European Union, for example, and you've looked at what members of unions similar to yours are experiencing in Greece, in Portugal, in Italy. They are experiencing, in Ireland too, experiencing a loss of earnings, a loss of jobs, a loss of pensions that far outstrips anything that's happening to British workers. And Britain, of course, does have a serious deficit and it has a serious debt problem. So when you look overseas, do you not think to yourself and say to your members, you know, well, we've got to be realistic here. This isn't just about Britain. This is something that's happening around the industrialised world, and we have to step up to the wider responsibilities.
Well, I start by having nothing but admiration for people in Greece and France and Spain who have resisted the same principle that I'm trying to resist here, which is austerity always hits those with the least, and we are never the ones who cause the problem. And so I don't look abroad.
You say resisted, but frankly, in many cases, it hasn't been resistance. In Greece, they have accepted a 20% slashing of public sector wages.
They've had 15 general strikes in Greece.
Sure, but not on this particular issue of, for example, accepting that there will be major cuts in salaries in the civil service and the public sector in Greece. In Ireland, for example, they had I think it was called the Croke Park Agreement, where the unions and the government worked together on long-term civil service and public sector pay freezes, on accepting that the pensions conditions would have to change fundamentally. Unions and governments, in the light of crisis, have worked together. Why can't you pick up that spirit and run with it?
Well, fundamentally because I don't agree with cooperating with the medicine that I think is being wrongly applied and to the wrong patient. I start from this. If we all just accept that what's happening at the moment will carry on happening, we will pay a bigger and bigger and bigger price. What I'm advocating is someone has got to articulate something different. So, for example, why are we all worshipping at the altar of the markets? The markets who don't care about health services or welfare or how people at the bottom do, they care about making money. Why are the markets now determining social policy, picking prime ministers and governments in some of European countries who, if you do not challenge their role, ultimately means you will always give in to austerity because that's the price of keeping their confidence.
Is this Mark Serwotka, the PCS union leader, speaking, or Mark Serwotka, the Trotskyite ideologue?
It's Mark Serwotka, the PCS union leader, who recognises if you don't challenge the way the system is making those at the bottom pay, there is no way of stopping it.
But in your socialist, some call it Trotskyite analysis of economics and your rejection of capitalism and the market, do you think you truly represent the views of the almost 300,000 people that are in your union?
Well, I think the accusation of being a Trotskyist is bandied around by...
Well, it's not an accusation. You're entitled to be a Trotskyist, and I think in your past you've openly acknowledged it.
And if I was, I would tell you I was. I'm a socialist. I'm a socialist.
But you worked with Socialist Organiser when you were younger, and that was an avowedly Trotskyite organisation.
For 3 years when I was in my 20s, absolutely. But I'm here as a socialist, representing people in my trade union. I believe the system needs to be fundamentally changed. And the reason I believe members do support that is because if you don't challenge it, you will never defend your pay and your pension and your job, because the way the system is currently working is to ensure that the people at the bottom make the biggest sacrifices, while, if we're honest, those at the top are laughing their way to the bank. And the people who cause the problem are still getting huge bonuses, they still have their big houses, they still have their fabulous pension pots. Public sector workers who did nothing to cause it are paying with their jobs, their livelihoods and their salary income.
But the evidence is that this language of class war, which frankly is what it is, turns the British public off. If you look at the figures, the polling figures that have come out in the last week or so, the British public is saying that they have much more faith in the Cameron-Osborne economic management than they do have in the views they hear from the Labour Party, from Ed Balls and Ed Miliband, and you're way to the left of them. So it seems that, you know, your analysis of what is wrong and how to fix it is just completely out of whack with the British public.
Well, I don't accept that. What I do accept is it's out of kilter with the mainstream political parties in Britain, and that's the real issue here. When I was a lad being brought up, the difference between the people with the red rosette and the blue rosette was a chasm, it was a gulf. Now, unfortunately, in politics in Britain, everyone's squeezed to the centre and the differences are far less. And the reason Ed Miliband, in my view, isn't very popular is because what people want to hear is a real alternative, not where we'll cut a bit less slowly, a bit less severely, because people want to be inspired that there is a different route possible. And that's what I'm trying to advocate. And
but leaving aside the partisan polling, people in Britain, by clear majorities, seem to believe that, yes, a period of prolonged austerity and cuts in the size of government and in public spending, and indeed in things like public sector pensions, have to be a significant part of any government programme. That's where the public is right now.
Well, the BBC poll on November the 30th showed over 60% of people supported the strike. On Sky News, it was 71%. Incredible figures. So these don't show that people are against what we're doing. What they reflect, though, is that for 2 years, every media outlet, every politician has told people the same thing. It's inevitable and it's got to happen. What we in the unions are trying to say, and I wish Labour were doing it, is actually there's a different route to cut your way out of these problems. You can grow your economy through investment, not through austerity.
Yeah, well, there's no doubting you have no time for Ed Miliband. You've called him a disgrace, amongst other things. But there are other union leaders who are completely out of kilter with you. The TUC leader, Brendan Barber, is reported in the summer of last year to have called you a, quote, fundamentalist. And when you said to the New Statesman that Arthur Scargill was a union leader that you admired and that a lot of what he did was quite right, I think a lot of other union leaders looked at what happened to Scargill, destroyed the National Union of Mine Workers and fundamentally lost in his struggle with Margaret Thatcher and thought, you know what, that's where Mark Serwotka wants to take the movement now.
Well, I lived in a South Wales mining community and I was absolutely clear that the butchery that took place on our communities, shutting coal mines, throwing hundreds of thousands of people out of work, was politically motivated and it was wrong.
But Scargill lost.
The miners lost, but they didn't lose because they weren't right. They lost because the rest of the trade union movement in Britain, unfortunately, did not swing behind them and try to ensure that they won. And what would be an absolute tragedy is if you fast forward to 2012 and the trade union movement repeated the same mistake, and many people decided to accept these attacks on pensions rather than
well,
try to
you call it a
oppose
mistake. I just look at, and it brings us back to the opening of this interview, I just look at what is happening right now in the argument of on strategy over pensions, and I see you becoming isolated from the rest of the union leadership. It is happening all over again, isn't it?
Well, I repeat my point that that remains to be seen, because a few union leaders in a room does not represent hundreds of thousands of their members and they're activists, and they've got to convince their members that they're right. And I think what those members will say to them, and ultimately it's a matter for them, is why did I lose money for something you told me 6 weeks ago was completely unacceptable, and now you're telling me I should accept? And I look forward to seeing how those debates go in those unions.
Well, I find it fascinating that you pitch it as this possible division between union leaders and their memberships. I just wonder whether you yourself feel there's a real danger of a significant number of union leaders becoming completely out of touch with their members. We see union membership declining on the whole, but we see a whole host of union leaders on very fat salaries, well over £100,000 a year for a whole bunch of them. Your salary isn't bad either, at £86,000, plus a whole list of add-ons as well. Are you really in touch with your membership?
Well, I believe I am in touch with the membership. I entirely accept I earn a lot more money than the average PCS member.
And you did promise them that you would not take a lot of your salary to stay in touch with them, but you didn't keep that promise.
Well, I told them I would never accept the full salary and have given £83,000 of my salary back to the Union Strike Fund.
You say that over more than a decade, but the fact is you did take the full salary. You may have given a bit back every year, but you took the full salary. You said you wouldn't. But I just wonder generally, leaving aside your own personal situation, whether you think it is wrong for union leaders to be on the sorts of salaries they're on.
Well, I've got to correct you. You can't say on the one hand you give £83,000 back and then say you took the full whack. Clearly I didn't take the full whack. But I am very, very well paid. And I don't believe I'm in touch with our members on the basis of salary levels. I believe I'm in touch with them because I go to speak to them, I tour the country, and I'm prepared to articulate their concerns. What I think is currently the issue that we're all going to have to focus on is if some union leaders do not have the stomach for the fight, who don't believe they can win, that's their choice. They have to persuade their members of that, and I will accept that outcome. What I'm saying to you clearly is I ask people to go on strike against something, and all of those things remain, and I am not therefore prepared to sign away people's pensions in the next few months.
And a final thought on union strategy. the big unions, not yours, but the biggest unions still financially support the Labour Party. They're crucial to Labour. Do you believe they will have to end that support, given your opinion of where the Labour leadership is failing workers?
Ultimately, they've all got to make their own decision, but certainly the view that we take in PCS is that the whole point of supporting a political party is that political party should speak for the people you represent. It's been very apparent to me for the last 10 to 15 years that the Labour Party is not speaking for the bulk of working people, and that's why we don't fund them.
And you want that financial tie cut for all the big unions?
No, I think those unions have to make their own decisions based on how they analyse things. What I can say to you is, if I'm in charge of PCS in the next 10 years, we still will not have given Labour a single penny.
Mark Serwotka, thanks for being on Hard Talk.
Thanks very much.